There you go. Oh, whoops. Just unmute that. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm not sure how many people are going to join. It's just time in Australia. Most people are at work right now. So.
Yeah, it's early, right?
It was awesome when we got locked down for Corona. That wasn't the awesome part, but we'd get about 50 people. But that's because people just had nothing to do all day. In fact, some of the guys looked like they just got out of bed purposely for the chat, to listen into the chat. So, Shawn, I reckon let's get straight into it. There's been a few people on who DM me for some things, but I'm just keen to chat with you from the beginning. There's one big theme I'd love to chat with you about is your longevity in one place in a ruthless sport. Something that's, I look at the NBA and I just see chops and changes, and if you're not performing right now, you've got to be out of here. And there's two aspects I'd love to explore from that. Is one, doing what you train to do, strength and conditioning, keeping people injury free, helping performance and all that kind of stuff. But also those other skills. I can't think of a better word than political, but being able to survive, there's got to be some aspect of that where it's, or your part of that would be your ability to connect with a new coach and say, hey, mate, I'm actually the guy for you for that, to get buy-in from the players and all those softer skills that we don't really get to explore much in our qualifications, degrees, certificates, and so forth. But you cool with that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right.
You want me to dive right into an answer, or you have some specific questions you like to start with?
Let's actually, quick 1 minute summary. So I kind of know, can you tell us a little bit of about what you were doing before you were with the Pacers? Because I think you first got employed as an athletic trainer or something like that. You kind of went.
Yeah. So yeah, my undergraduate degree was in athletic training, and this was when I started off at going to college for business, but I was just like most young people. I was 17 at the time. I was stupid. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Long story short, one of the schools that I attended during my brief first round of collegiate experience asked me not to come back. And so I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Just like, I have a senior in high school and he tells me what he wants to do. I'm not really sure I believe that, but
Yep.
Who is prepared to make a decision on the rest of their life? And even at our age, we're not even sure we're doing this for the rest of our life. But that's the beauty of it. So athletic training sparked my interest because when I met with the program director at a university, he mentioned, I said, no offense, what do you guys do besides tape ankles and hand out water? And he gives me the whole rundown about, what they do. But he also mentions the adjunct professions, and he says strength and conditioning. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I didn't even really know that was a profession. I didn't know it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my degree in athletic training only wanting to be a strength coach, because I never wanted to put my arm around somebody and say, hey, it's okay, here are the Band-Aids and let's tape an aspirin to it, and that sort of thing. I wanted to be more of the proactive side. Not to say athletic trainers aren't proactive themselves, but in my young brain, I'm thinking, no, I have no interest in that. I want to be in the weight room and yell and get my pecs big and chest bump people. But anyways, with that, I ended up then evolving into my role is, or carving out a role as a strength coach with various internships. And I worked in the collegiate environment for 7 years before getting the opportunity with the Pacers. And now this is the end of season 15 with the Pacers.
That's incredible. Now, one thing that I've noticed in my career is if I've worked with someone who has, in Australia, I'm going to say a similar sort of parallel as the physiotherapist. I know there are differences between the athletic trainer and there's a physical therapist and stuff like that. But when I found someone has strength and conditioning and physiotherapy, I found that they tend to see injuries don't do plyometrics, or I'm kind of exaggerating here, but they see an injury, whereas I see the benefits of performance. Did you have to go through that struggle as you were transitioning from going athletic training into S&C?
So in S&C, when I was a youngster starting out, I was very careful as to who I told. If I went to a strength and conditioning convention or were around strength and conditioning people, I was very cautious as to who I told I was also in athletic training, because
Okay.
the old school thought was, they're all after our jobs. They think they can do what we do, and they're going to put us all out of work. And I'm just over there thinking, no, that's really not the case.
Yep.
I mean, most athletic trainers really just want to be athletic trainers. They want to care for the athlete,
Yep.
where strength coaches are obviously from a different lens. And it wasn't like it was a big secret, but I wouldn't be so forthcoming with that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people would say that's going to really pay off down the line. And in my experiences in the university setting, it was, I would see the disconnect. As a strength coach, I'm thinking the traditional athletic training style would be, all right, well, they have left knee tendonitis. We're handling all of the left leg in the training room, and you can only strengthen the right leg. I'm like, okay. But I was still doing things with the left leg around what the limitations would be. And eventually, I rose the ranks enough, and people valued that outlook, especially in the NBA, where you play every other day.
Yep.
And there's a fine line between you're doing rehab, prehab, or strength training. You're not doing a lot of high level S&C in the middle of the season. So you need somebody, in my opinion, to walk that delicate balance of what is right for that person on that day, from a rehabilitation, prehabilitation, and improving sport performance. It's a big continuum.
100%. And then I'm guessing, and we've touched on this before with the generalist versus specialist, or generalist and specialist, and all that kind of stuff. I'm guessing as your career builds, where you can oversee that, you've got a better understanding of the full progression. You can start to plug holes where you go, okay, wait a second. That's great that you're doing some low-level isometrics, and that's from an athletic training perspective. But from a performance perspective, we need them to be able to do a triple hop or whatever, take off on that leg and land and stuff like that. There's a bit of a gap here that we need to fill. Is that something that you found benefited later?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge benefit. And I think that one of the things in being able to bridge that gap is being able to speak the language of, I know the language from the medical side, and I know the language from the S&C side. So when I can make that, we need this performance factor, and I know you need this rehab factor, but I can phrase it in a way where both sides feel comfortable, everybody's on board, from the head physical therapist to the strength coaches to, and not to say we don't have our debates, of course, on things. Every staff should have those debates, but I am able to walk that line because I'm able to speak the language in both areas, and it has paid off.
So looking back now on your career, and maybe advice for a young listener now, what would you be recommending? I mean, should they have followed a similar path to you, where it's kind of, hey, we'll do the athletic training and then later on S&C, or is it better to be S&C and then move along? Do you regret trying to step from one to the other, or was that challenge maybe hamstrung you in the beginning of your career because you had less experience in the S&C realm, but now it's beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, I felt hamstrung in the beginning of my career because I probably sent out 110 blind resumes to jobs I wasn't qualified for, with zero strength and conditioning experience. And I thought, hey, I have this knowledge now. But I mean, it's really hard to look back. I've been 15 seasons with one team. So I certainly don't have any regrets. It's paid off for me. And probably outside of, it used to be supplement companies that were your number one sales call, and it's now become tech companies. And I would say that it's probably young strength coaches is probably my number one email or phone call that I receive these days, all asking, what's the best route? What's the best path? What should I do? Like, honestly, I don't know. Everybody has their own path. It's unique. It's unique to them, and your experiences build who you are as a clinician. And, you know, I like my path, but that doesn't mean it's the best path. I think that as long as you go in willing to learn from, I'll say, both sides of the wall, from the strength, if you're a strength coach, if you're willing to learn how the athletic trainers, physical therapists speak, and you're willing to learn their language and learn their ways, that's only going to pay dividends. It's the isolated, it's the people that put themselves in isolation or in their silo and say, the trainers don't know anything that they're talking about, and we should be doing this and we should be doing that. And that's not going to get you anywhere. Not in that job, not for that team, not for your professional development. You may not agree with everything, but you need to speak that language. And that's all I would say. I mean, you know, my two assistants, it took me a while to figure out that when they read an article that kind of bridges the gap between rehabilitation and strength conditioning, and I would say it's not quite 100% of how they're executing it or how they're viewing it. And I realized they just weren't in that language from as early an age that I was. You know, they're reading it from a strength coach lens versus a rehabilitation lens or a prehab lens, or the words you choose in a meeting mean so much. And that would be my only advice, is to really embrace the people that you work with and learn about what are their goals for the athlete? What are they seeing with the athletes? It doesn't mean you agree and align all the time, but you have to have that conversation. You have to have that debate. We debate it all the time with our group. And part of the longevity thing, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit, is, I would imagine we'll talk about in a little bit, is, so the head athletic physical therapist / athletic trainer and the assistant, we've been together for all 15 seasons. Wow. The head physical therapist has been there for a year longer than the two of us. So he's been there for 16 seasons, but as a group, 15 seasons. We are by far the longest tenured group, like 3
How long
trainers
have you been married
and
for?
Strength coaches. What's that?
How long have you been married for?
Yeah, well, that's that goes along with professional sports. I'm not married.
Okay, all right, cool. I was going to say, because that's 15 years. I've been married to my wife for 2, and we've been together for 6. And I think you have a relationship with that they'll be that close and that intense, because you guys are traveling together and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's hard to you know, and the way our office was set up for the first 11, 12 seasons together, we were 3 of us in about a 500 square foot office. So it's annoying a lot of times, but we had great conversations and we would challenge each other and pick each other's brains. And so part of our longevity is I can read the mood of the other guys in the room and what they're thinking, and they know what I'm thinking. And there's a lot of unspoken subtlety in that and how our dynamic is. And from what we've been told, when we've had a few visitors come in, they're like, wow, the level of communication that you guys have is really unbelievable. And they don't understand. They're not even seeing the nonverbal cues that we're giving each other.
Yep. Now, Shawn, one thing I want to, you mentioned the term pathways, and this is something that I don't really have an exact strong opinion on this, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Is I look at my mentors and the sort of the generation before me, and bearing in mind I was professional S&C coach, getting paid in the late 90s, coming into it. My mentors, some of them were like physical education teachers who happened in Australia or in South Africa, happened to be closest or have a connection with the team, and that was their pathway. And then they started part-time, and it kind of grew that way. And, you know, for a lot of my mentors, there wasn't really a pathway because the professional teams were just starting to get this on. And it's interesting now because I'm starting to see that the advice that those guys gave me is not the best advice for me to give to my guys, because it's totally different. In where I'm based in Brisbane, within about 150 kilometers, let's say 300 kilometers, so 150 k's north, 150 k's south, there's 7 universities that are producing 100 graduates a year in this exercise physiology, exercise science kind of realm. But there are not that many professional sports being, teams being added to it. The staffing's not growing at the same rate. I'm sort of interested in what when you get all these emails come through, what are some sort of go-to suggestions that you should be, to an undergrad coming through, looking at you at the pinnacle of professional sport? What are some advice or tips you give?
Yeah, I mean, we got connected because of my tweet about handing out free advice. I don't always hand out advice to every email, because it's literally, if I answered every email about advice or about a product or something, I wouldn't have time to do my day job. So I literally look for the people that phrase good questions, are concise, use their words carefully, proper punctuation. Not to say that I'm a grammar expert or I'm, like nitpicking, but if I have to pick people to respond to, I'm looking for the people that actually seemingly get it.
Yep.
That understand that time is valuable and they have a good question rather than something they could look up on, a lot of people seemingly haven't heard of Google.
Yep.
I'm like, if you can Google that shit, Google it. Don't email me.
Yep.
But
and that applies to all things. Like I get questions on social media, like just a reply, and I think, mate, that is something that you can just look up.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting there because I've, in the last probably 2 years, I've been quite trigger happy with the block button. And here's the thing is, if you ask me a dumb question, and when I say a dumb question, I mean that in terms of it's low effort for you to go find it. You're just putting the monkey on my back. I block those because that's a mindset. That is a mindset that is going to plague that person. And I'm not going to take a responsibility for them to change that. So yeah, and so you're getting emails like this.
I totally agree, and those are the people that, unfortunately, and they may be a great kid and they may be well intentioned, but if you're not thinking that next level in the way you're phrasing the question or what you're asking, you probably just, I hate to say it, you may never get it. Yep. I can't teach you that.
Yep.
But what I do encourage, the people that I do correspond with is build your network. I mean, yep. It's obvious you have to be smart. You have to know your X's and O's. You need coaching reps. Yep. We have an internship program, and some kids come in at higher levels than others. But a lot of kids just need more reps. It's just like being under a bar or anything. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And, if you come and apply for an internship and say, I just graduated or I'm about to graduate with an exercise science degree, my first question, and I would like to submit my resume, my first question is, have you been to your college or your university's weight room? Are you volunteering there? Mm-hmm. And the ones that say, no, I've never been down there. No, I mean, show some initiative. If this is what you really want to do, you're going down there and you're saying, and you're bugging them and saying, because most of us, who's going to refuse free help? Yep. I don't care if it's just cleaning dumbbells or whatever it is. Yep. If somebody comes and shows the initiative, you're going to bend over backwards, because a lot of our work is done behind the scenes.
Yep.
And then just encouraging them to go out and meet as many people as they can and make those calls or go to conventions and pick people's brains. And, it's a lot of times it's the beer after. It's not so much the question that wows the person. It's the just getting to know them while having a beer, and you're kind of fly on the wall, and maybe you throw out a random question or two. You're the small fish there, and you're looking up to the big person with a big ego, and he's telling the stories and all that stuff. You don't have to interject yourself. Just be there. Maybe say a couple of things here and there, but that's my opinion. No two paths are the exact right way, you know.
Yep.
That's just how I did it. That's how I feel is best, but that doesn't mean it's right.
Yep. What just on that, because what you were saying, I followed a similar path. I was an absolute nerd. When I say nerd, like just an eager beaver. I was an eager beaver. Talking to the coaches, talking to the gym staff, strength and conditioning, anyone that I could speak to. And then I remember my first conference, and this is back when I was in South Africa. I didn't say a word because I couldn't believe that someone like a researcher who had read all his papers was talking, and I was having a beer, and he wouldn't even know who I was, but I was in the same circle standing, or the drinks afterwards and stuff, and I was so that took me down memory lane.
I look up to those people, and a lot of those people have no idea that I was just that starry-eyed kid over there in the corner, like sitting there hanging off every word thinking, wow, I can't believe I'm actually in the same circle as this guy. Doesn't even know my name, but
Exactly.
I'm just there.
Exactly.
So I have to remind myself. So with my filter of, I don't respond to everybody, but there are times I have to remind myself that with 15 years in the NBA, like it or not, some people look at me that way.
Yep.
And I have to remind myself, like, don't be an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm really good at being an asshole, but.
So I just want to come back, because I agree. I'd love to see initiative, but Shawn, I'm really am concerned for the younger generation, especially the current undergrads and stuff. And some of them are coming to me at the end of a 4-year university degree, and they are wanting to do their first prac. And it's an official prac. So here in Australia, you have to do 140 hours if you want to be what's called an accredited exercise physiologist. This is more rehab-based stuff. And you got to do it with healthy populations. You got to do cardiac. You got to do a bunch of things. And I'm thinking, in your final year, now you've kind of been told you have to do these pracs. What responsibility do you put on the universities to be delivering that message from the first year? Like, hey, Shawn, welcome. This is your first day. We're doing Anatomy 101. By the way, in the next few weeks, you should be going to the weight room, learning to coach, doing all that kind of stuff. What responsibility do you put on the individual, the young student, and what do you put on the university lecturer or department who's guiding these kids?
That's really hard, because with our specific organization, we have to have students that are receiving college credit. So they have virtually zero experience. Mm-hmm. So my bar is pretty low, and our key times are during the school year. So our applicant pool is generally very small. And so I'm looking for people that are just good hangout people and that genuinely want to be in the profession and at least have a decent baseline knowledge. Mm-hmm. We're not handing the keys over for them to train an NBA player. Yep. That's not it at all. But we want them to have a thought process. We don't want them to just regurgitate information. I'm also always a little leery of super fans, of just basketball super fans. Yes. That you can tell they just want to be there in the environment. And it doesn't matter if you said you're here just to rebound basketballs and they would say, I would do it. No, I want somebody who is committed to being a lifelong learner and that's passionate and understands how hard it is to get to be an NBA strength coach. Yep. And that just because you walk out of here and you finish your internship doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. This is the beginning. You've had a great opportunity for your next opportunity. And it may not be a great opportunity, but at least it is a stepping stone. Mm-hmm. So a kid that understands that's really, I mean, we can teach them the X's and O's, but I want somebody that just understands that. I mean, we all want somebody that shows up early, stays late, is a fly on the wall, ask questions at the right time. I mean, that's all general stuff that we all want out of interns or young people. But it's just that passion and being able to hang out in an environment that is high pressure. We're on a road trip. We come back after 8 days. We played 5 games. We lost 4 of them. Don't come in, hey, how you doing? Hey, it's great to see you guys. No, we just lost 4 out of 5 games. Shut up. And it's 9 a.m. and we're adjusting to a new time zone.
Yep.
Just be a fly on the wall.
Yep.
So somebody who can, the emotional part of it, of just being able to read people, it's a huge factor. Yep. And you can't really put that on a university.
Yep. No. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So let's go into a little bit now. I'm keen on your thoughts on the specialist generalist, because from the outside, it looks like in the States, especially in the private sector, that there are people who identify as a strength coach. And it's similar in Australia, but probably not as pronounced. Like, you pay me to get strong. That's it. And I'm actually not that. If your squat goes up or your deadlift goes up or whatever, whereas I'm on another side of the continuum where it's more like, hey, it's about athletic development. And if your squat goes backwards or your deadlift goes backwards, I don't really care if you on the podium more or you less injured or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So with these young coaches coming through, how do you advise them to kind of find that balance of understanding everything there is about strength and power and speed and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time keeping the focus on, hey, this guy needs to play however many games every second day on average for a full season, all that kind of stuff. How do you balance your advice to them on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about availability. I mean, that's a very general answer, of course, but and I think it takes all of us quite some time to get over that ego factor of, I'm here to make you stronger and faster and all of these great performance factors. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, in some cases it does. Some guys really need that, and that might get them over the hump. But other guys, it's about spending more time in the film room or spending more time doing player development stuff outside of the weight room. We have guys that come in and they won the genetic lottery, and I'll say, there's really not a lot I can do for you. Is there anything you need to do to help you on the floor to get you more minutes? From my perspective, is it your second jump? Is it getting around somebody? Where do I fill that gap for you? Because from what I'm looking at, you jump well, you run well, you do all these things well. Here's what I'm thinking in season for you. It might be 2 days a week that I'm going to see you because I don't really have any major concerns.
Yep.
That's not often the case, but trying to make sure that the young strength coach is really looking at what's truly important. It's not your ego and saying bench press or squat or whatever your lift is went up by X%. It doesn't matter. It's what is the rate limiting factor for that guy for me on the court? Is he not playing, and why isn't he playing? Or is he playing, and how do we manage? Does he need a specific area to improve in, or do we need to just truly manage how much volume he's doing and his workloads? So to me, every player is different. That's the unique part of this high performance part, is not everybody needs the same thing. So look at each guy. You're trying to have a team view, but really it's an individual view. Every guy needs something different. And some guys obviously overlap, but what's the rate limiting factor in that player's game? And is it something that I can help with, or is it a coaching, a technical aspect, a psychological aspect, which of course we have our hands in. But you can never think that, well, he went down 2 inches in his vertical jump, he's not quite the same player and it's my fault.
Yep.
Usually it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And if we went down 2 inches in a vertical jump, maybe he's just fatigued. Maybe he's not sleeping. Maybe he's not eating. It's a recovery issue.
Yep.
Might be a programming issue. It could be, but you have to have the awareness to step back and say, how have I failed him? Or what does he need that I'm not providing him? You have to look at yourself and just understand that sometimes it's really on you. It doesn't matter that if his vertical went down 2 inches and his squat went up 20 pounds, and now coach doesn't rely on him in late situations. It has nothing to do with your performance metrics. There's so many other variables going on.
It's interesting. One of our favorite things, and I've said this, I've said, no coach has ever said that my players are, not or too strong or too fast. And when you reflect on that, you think, well, maybe they didn't, but they did say their perception wasn't great, or their hand-eye coordination, or their decision-making under fatigue. And so that's the coach's language to say they're spending too much time in the gym. And you see it on Twitter, and it always has the most retweets. Like, no coach has said an athlete's too strong. No, yeah, but why are they not? The strongest guys aren't always excelling, except with powerlifting and possibly weightlifting. It's not the strongest guys.
But the strongest guys, people gravitate towards their strengths.
Yep.
So if you're a really strong player, an athlete, you generally like to be in the weight room. Some guys are just genetically gifted and they are strong. They're going to be one of the strongest people. But those strong guys love to be in the weight room. And the coaches, like you said, the coach is thinking, why is he always in the damn weight room? Why isn't he in the film room? Or why isn't he doing extra shooting sessions or something? So you have to be careful with those guys too, of saying, hey, get out of here. Because it's a reflection on you, because the coach, after a loss, when do you hear the criticism? It's always after a loss. Hey, that team out-toughed us tonight, or they were faster than us, or something. There's always variables and factors, your team makeup, the individual matchups. Not to take responsibility away from us, because sometimes it is on us. Yep. But a lot of times it's just the criticism falls after a bad season, a bad game, knee-jerk reaction stuff.
100%. I used to talk about it in tennis. So I was with tennis for about 5 years, specifically in tennis for 5 years. And if the player lost either at a Grand Slam in the 5th set or in a regular ATP match in the 3rd set, fitness always came up. And this wasn't me being defensive. I was trying to educate the coaches. Wait a second. So if Shawn and I are playing and Shawn's more skillful than me, I might be fitter, but Shawn can put the ball exactly where he wants, and he just has me running side to side. My fitness allowed me to compete, but his skills were what won. So even though Shawn wins in the 3rd set, I actually need, it's not a lack of fitness from myself. I need to work on my skills to be able to match Shawn with skills, and educating them that. And you see the same thing in swimming. Oh, they lost in the final 10 meters. They need to do more endurance. Well, no, maybe if they had a better start, maybe if they had better timing, maybe if they had better mobility and they weren't as locked up, so they could be more streamlined, like to actually dig a few levels deeper and not just go, fitness, it's just chucking.
Right. It's I usually hear that with agility. The guy just, he's a step behind, he's late reacting. Well, how about basketball IQ? He's not anticipating, he's not understanding where the point guard's eyes are when he's playing defense, and that his man, he didn't pay attention in the scouting, in the film session or whatever, and he's late to recognize everything that's happening. So he's always a step behind.
100%.
And if you're an average athlete, if you're not a super freak athlete, it's just magnified. Yeah. And so sometimes it's not about, say, are you doing agility drills every day? It's not the agility drills. It's his mental processing speed of that specific task.
Yeah. Tennis was exactly the same. As soon as you got labeled a poor mover, the expectation was that you'd go do a bunch of ladder drills or cone drills or whatever. And it's like, wait a second. There's perception, decision-making, and then the movement. There's 2 processes that we're missing here. And there are a number of tennis players. I can tell you, I've got the stats. You could test them over 20 meters or 5 meters, whatever your thing was. You could do some kind of 505 change of direction thing. They can either test well or poorly. But on court, you speak to the opposition and they'll be like, wow, they just close down the court. They're so quick. Yeah, because they're looking at your grip when before you've even hit the ball, they look at your stance. They're reacting off that.
Yes.
So I can do as many of your little fancy footwork drills as you want.
Yeah.
It's going to do nothing.
Right. Yeah, it's identifying those body cues before something even happens, and they could be really slow-footed, but if they recognize those body cues and they're thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead, like playing chess, they're already there. They've anticipated it.
100%. Okay, now let's switch tack a little bit, yeah. Your longevity. Correct me if I'm wrong, you started sort of athletic trainer and strength and conditioning coach, went up to head strength and conditioning coach, performance, head of performance, sort of, is that basically the thing?
Director of sports performance is my current title right now.
Okay. Can you just tell us what the differences are between, sorry, my wife's just dropped in a delicious coffee. Can you just tell me, so head S&C, what's the difference between head S&C and S&C, and what's the difference between director of performance? Like, what are your roles? I'm guessing they broaden as you go on.
Yeah, so I mean, just as we'll say sports science, and I certainly understand it as a dedicated field. But in the U.S., it's a kind of a debated topic of strength coaches like to wear that badge and say, we read science too. And so we're sports scientists as well. But as NBA teams started to hire sports scientists, many of them kind of failed in those roles because it's a culture thing. You have to know the athlete, the coach. You have to speak those different languages, and you have to understand where guys are coming from, what the feel of the season is. And we were faced with the same sort of decision. Where do we go with the sports science role? And we had seen enough teams fail in their hires that I had a supportive staff and a supportive front office that I kind of grew into. I'm certainly not a sports scientist, but I know the sport and I know how to speak to coaches. I know how to speak to the key stakeholders, that I was going to kind of wear that hat of bridging the gap between all those areas. Now, when it comes to data analysis, I have people that do that for me, but they come to, I ask the questions, they come to me, I find out what is relevant or what other pieces are with that, or should we combine with that? What do I then tell the other people, the coach, the player, the strength coaches, the physical therapists, the GM? And so that's kind of what I view my role as. It's kind of that hub of information and making sense of it, and then trying to make some sort of plan and or give direction from the areas that I touch. I don't do a lot of strength conditioning right now. I mostly with rehab guys that need things, because once you get into that data, even though I'm not the one that's analyzing it, it's such a rabbit hole, and trying to make sense of all of the different pieces and how it all fits together. It's, as I'm sure it's extremely time consuming. So I don't do a lot on the floor anymore with the direct strength conditioning. What I try to do is help
just on that
programming.
Okay. I was just about to ask it. How much influence do you have on it, and what's the structure of the staffing currently?
Yeah, so we have our director of medicine or medical services. He's a physical therapist, athletic trainer. He's the one that's been there 16 years. His title has evolved over time. And then we have 2 physical therapists, other physical therapists and athletic trainers. And one of them is the other one that's been there for 15 seasons. We started a month apart. And then over the last 6 years, I've had 5 years, I think, 1 assistant strength coach. And then last year I was able to hire a 2nd assistant strength coach. And then we've added along the way, we have a team nutritionist who's a consultant. We're probably adding a daily nutritionist, somebody to kind of execute the plan of what the consultant puts together. And We have a massage therapist. So we've grown quite a bit in our time. But, you know, the NBA, with as soon as the LA Clippers were bought by Steve Ballmer, and it was a $2 billion acquisition, it didn't become a hobby to owners anymore. It became a business deal. And that's where staff started to grow, salaries started to grow.
What era was that? When did that happen?
That was probably about, I don't know exactly, but around 5 years ago.
Okay.
And then every team's valuation went through the roof. And that's where teams really started to look at, where do we add? Who are the people that touch the players every day? Where can we make the most impact? Where do we spend our money to make sure that we're competitive? So, and we still have a relatively small staff compared to the NBA. You know, we recognize the need for growth because of all the different areas that are becoming involved, and all the data points and all the technology, and what part of it is keeping up with the Joneses. But at the same time, we want to grow very carefully, because just adding people, you just add more problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
and it becomes exponential.
And I mentioned I mentioned the three of us were in one office, 500-600 square foot office for all those years together. That was huge. That was, I mean, if we had to go back to that tomorrow, we could do it. We wouldn't have a lot of the extra fluff, but at the same time, I think it's just that there's a lot of extra fluff, that you're doing it to say you're doing it.
Shawn, it's refreshing to hear you say that. So I don't know how much you know about the Australian landscape, but we've got national competitions in rugby league and Aussie rules, and it's very strict salary caps. And in one aspect, it's really cool, because you can only spend so much on a player, but it means that the sports science, they really basically, I think they say they really mine the athletes. Like, we get the best out of our athletes, because we've got a population of 22 million. And so to have these competing sports and stuff like that. But there's a definite sense that it's what you said, keeping up with the Joneses, and there's things that are happening. And I think it's more almost incestuous, like they doing it, so we need to, but they might be doing it because they've got an older squad or a younger squad, or it suits them. And a few years ago, it was fascinating. Every club was trying to get across to Arizona to do pre-season high altitude training. But there were clubs that were doing it that were almost going bankrupt, you know, like trying to figure out creative ways of doing it. But they had a young squad that, if they just did regular fitness, I put it this way, I don't think that the high altitude camps were adding that much of a percentage to justify the expense, but every other club was doing it. And it's fascinating, because you think at that high level, everything's going to be evidence-based, whatever your definition of that is. But there is this, they're doing it, so we should do it. Or you get tapped on the shoulder by the head coach going, "Hey, Shawn, how come we don't have it?" And you're like, because it's junk, or because it's cheese, or because we don't need it. Yeah, so
alkaline water. I mean, just you throw out any sort of thing, like, "Hey, I read an article that this team is doing it," and then you call that team and say, "Do you really believe in that?" "No, it's because of, you know, the owner's an investor," or, you know, "We have a player that's endorsed by that company, so we have them, you know, we have it in our refrigerator," or whatever it may be. It's always situational. The people that are doing the true science aspect of it know that sometimes it's just the placebo effect, or there's that game of, let's make the star player happy, or the owner happy, or the coach, whoever it may be, you know, and sometimes there's an article written, and in my role, it's, you know, you put your head down and think, "Oh God, people are going to think I'm a total fool." but I didn't sign on for that.
Yeah, I can tell you a story in Australia. One of our best, most recognized athletes, very strict paleo, sponsored by a sports drinking, what do you call it, like rehydration, whatever thing. And he didn't touch the stuff. He was the face of it. He was the Australian face of this particular sports brand. and didn't drink it. He drank out of the bottle, but he had his own stuff in there because he was strict paleo. He didn't take on, all these other sugars and preservatives and all that kind of stuff. But to 99.9% of the population, no one knew that. I knew it for a very specific reason, and you would know. Okay, so just interesting on that. So are you in a fair amount of contact with other people in similar positions across the NBA?
A fair amount. I think there has become this fear of, now that I'm, one of the older ones in the league, or probably the most tenured. If you want to view me as a strength coach, I think right now I'm the most tenured strength coach. But a lot of teams with newer people, there's that. Maybe I'm just an asshole, or maybe it's just the stranger danger. There a lot of times I've heard from teams saying, "Well, we're not allowed to talk about this or that competitive advantage," and like, I'm not really buying into the whole competitive advantage thing a whole lot, because I don't remember who wrote it. I read it somewhere, but what is it? 80% of our athletes are operating at 60% capacity. So when we start talking about competitive advantage and marginal gains and all that stuff, if our guys are sleeping 5 hours a night, it doesn't matter what rehydration strategy I'm giving them. There's the fundamental lack of sleep is number one right there. I could monitor their workloads, but if their sleep is all over the place or their diet is really way off, there's no marginal gains. There's some big rocks that we need to address first. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit with these guys. So I don't think there's a whole lot of competitive advantage from what one team is doing to another.
That's fascinating, because in my discussions with this, I think you might be our 40th episode. My discussions, I have been told, no, my team doesn't allow me to do this. And there's a couple of things there. Is like, I think there's so much interesting stuff without going into the 1%ers. In fact, I think most of the 1%ers are bullshit. So I'm not even interested in that competitive advantage. I'm interested in the more generic stuff to see what I can do better with my own athletes. But there's also another thing, and this might be a good segue into it, is I think we, in professional sport, given how volatile it is, and given how, and this doesn't really apply to you, but a lot of other people, how you can just get shifted on, I think you need to take a responsibility to develop streams of income, to actually develop a profile outside of your team. Your athletes do. The athletes will have the team stuff, and I'm guessing they've got some external endorsements and sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, and look after them. But anyway, I'm keen on your thoughts. What are your thoughts if, I say, hey, do you want to jump and have a Zoom chat? And they go, I'm not allowed to. Would you let your staff jump on?
I would, yeah. My contract restricts me from doing a lot of things.
Okay.
This is just a general chat. I knew you weren't coming in and asking me specifics about what we were doing with the Pacers. I really don't have a problem discussing what we do, but my contract has a lot of stipulations about that. But we're just having kind of a general chat. But also going into what your segue is I'm not allowed to have multiple streams.
Okay.
Because they feel like it's detracting from the time spent with the organization and where my focus may be. And I think that's unfortunate because, like we had exchanged some messages about, not a lot of us retire as strength coaches or performance directors. At some point, we just go and die off, It's kind of like an NBA player. Like all of a sudden it's 30, you have a basketball player who's 30 years old and you've seen him for 10 years playing the NBA. And the next year you're like, hey, where'd that guy go? I didn't, where the hell did he, it's the same thing with strength coaches. So we just kind of go and die. And I think it's really important for us to understand or figure out where our value is. And everybody wants to be a consultant. I'll say, that's what I'd love to do. I want to be a consultant someday. Everybody says the same thing. There are a lot of people out there being a consultant, but what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What is your background? And, you know, is it because you speak better than the next person, you can regurgitate a bunch of information that you learned, or is it because you have practical application? And, you know, but what does all that mean? You know, how do you jump out of the rat race if you want to, like you have done? You know, I admire what you've done. You are making a go of being outside of a team sport and doing what you're doing. I mean, that's hard. That's scary, you know, because I'm going to get fired at some point. Yeah. It could be next year. It could be next week. I mean, it could be who knows when. And I'm frankly not prepared. I'm just hoping that another team says, hey, yeah, we like what he did there. And he's tall and has great hair. And so we're going to hire him.
Well, I've got the tall part, not the gray hair part. But with that, like, so just so I understand, how restrictive? I mean, Shawn, I'm thinking, and I think this for a lot of the guests that we've had, and if anyone wants to look through the guests, they're unbelievable. And an internship, your internship, why can't? Are you restricted from saying, hey guys, I'm going to offer a 3-month internship for 5 interns, and it's going to be $1,000 for those 3 months. People pay Shawn Windle, and you'll expose them to MBA training and all that kind of stuff. As a young coach, I would have paid that. But can you not do that? Are you like, where's the line for the income streams drawn? I mean, if you wrote a book, you know, could you publish that?
I don't think a book is specifically mentioned in my contract, but I could imagine
they go quite specific. Like they say, hey, you can't do this, this, and this.
But there are interviews that I have to go through, and they'll either be approved or denied.
Okay.
Just a general interview. And sometimes it's, you know, I'm kind of an introvert. I'm not just out there in, you know, the world. So sometimes I'll hide behind my contract and say, no, I'm not interested in doing it. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people offer to come over, and I've talked about a mentorship with the organization of having some people come over. And but you know, at the same time, I don't know if I'm really comfortable with that, because of I want our guys to feel like they're in a safe and secure space where they're not being part of the experiment. It's, you know, every time you add even if it's as simple as a testing, something you want to do with testing to evaluate your athlete. If I'm adding this and I really feel that it's important, I'm probably going to have to give something up.
Yep.
Because it's a barter system.
Yep.
And, you know, to have outside people rotating in and out of our weight room, it's a demanding environment. It's hard. And I feel like our weight room is a very sacred place. It's hallowed ground to me. And my professional integrity, I don't want people in there.
Yep.
You know, I've worked hard to protect that space. And, you know, it's appealing to think of renting out that space essentially for interns. But at the same time, if I were a player and I've got 3 new faces standing there watching me work out, and we're all standing in the corner talking about them, I just don't think that's best for our players. But no, but really, to answer your question, I wouldn't be allowed to do that.
Well, and Shawn, just to let you know, my facility is 86 square meters, so I have the exact same. It's coming from a slightly different angle, but I have the exact same mindset. Is if I like that's actually why we have an internship, and it's 1 year, so the clients and the athletes get used to that person, and it's not flow in, flow out. And these 140-hour pracs at these university students, I say, guys, for a number of reasons, but touching on your point, I'm not interested in that, because in those 140 hours, and bearing in mind, you know, someone might come Monday, Friday, an athlete might come Monday, Friday. So those are only 2 times that the intern gets to interact with the person. So it takes a long time for my athletes to feel comfortable with who's this guy. And, like, you know, there's a bunch of things there. So I totally understand what you're saying, and it messes up the culture. You can actually feel there's a slight change there, and all that kind of stuff. But would you, I mean, would they stop you from offering something very similar, but it was a once a week phone call? Like, let's say the Shawn Windle mentorship, 3 months, $1,200, $100 a phone call. You have 5 guys on the phone call, and once a week you touch base. Could they stop you with that?
Yeah, that's not specifically addressed in my contract. I may be able to get away with something like that.
What
I would be willing to do. I would be willing to do something like that.
Yeah.
I just don't think I have that much wisdom to give.
Rubbish. You see, this is the thing is. So I've run a mentorship program, and we've got high-level strengthening coaches who've achieved way more than me on the coaching side, Olympian, medalist kind of stuff. And this is actually one thing I want you do, Shawn. Like, I'm just pumped that we even interacted. And this is, have you heard of the curse of knowledge? Do you know what that is?
No.
The curse of knowledge is, there's some interesting studies on it. So let's say I give you a tune to hum or a beat to make, and you've got it in your mind, you know what it is. And then we ask some neutral person to guess what is Shawn humming, or what is he beating to? And you, because you know it's in your mind, you will overestimate the neutral person's chance of knowing what beat or tune you're humming. And the curse of knowledge is basically, we assume because we've done it and we know it, that everyone else will know it. And this is where, as strength and conditioning coaches, we think, man, it's so easy, like to do an athletic development program, like and this is where that imposter syndrome comes in, because like anyone could do my job. No, those nuances and those lessons that you've picked up in the last 15 years, no one else, like there's no one else who could do that, who could balance the ego of the head coach with the ego of the player, with the desire to get them to do this. And that is a skill that, is super, super valuable. And we were talking about younger coaches, like part of our role is to help them see things that they can't see, and to be able to, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm getting on my high horse.
I'm glad you said that, because I turn down speaking opportunities all the time, because I'm like, man, I've heard other people talk about this stuff way better than I can speak about it. Or I read these young strength coaches that have great information. My problem, where I do know I have value, is they could never apply it.
Yes.
What about the guy that says, I'll give you 5 minutes today, what are we going to do?
Yep.
And that's that analogy that you read and memes or whatever, of you overpay this guy to come in, and in 30 seconds he just comes in and he hits the hammer in the spot and everything now works. And they said, why'd we pay you all that money for 30 seconds worth of work? He said, you're paying me for the 30 years of experience it took me to figure out in 30 seconds what spot to hit.
100%.
And yeah, I do understand there's value in that. But when you talk about nuts and bolts of what we do, I'm like, man, there are a lot of smart dudes out there. They just haven't applied it yet.
Yeah. But, and I also think...
Sorry, I say dudes and females.
And females, yeah. No, I got it. But I also think that one of the things that holds us back is when you've gone through decades of applying it, you start to see the simplicity of it. But most people can't see that simplicity, but you have to go through the decades to see it. And then that's where, again, the curse of knowledge and the imposter syndrome comes in, because he goes, it's so simple. But one of the cool things, Shawn, and this is what keeps me grounded, and this is why I know you would have value, and many of my mentees who, again, but when you think mentee, don't think first year out of university, think 3 Olympic cycles, because I get to see a situation that looks so simple. It's a gym, 86 square meters with multiple athletes on multiple programs, and I get to work with all of them. But I throw even a young coach with 3 or 4 years experience, and they are stressed. They're struggling. They're trying to balance, and they overcompensate on this, and they undercompensate, and they don't address certain issues and stuff like that. So on a daily well, at least I get a weekly reminder that my skills are actually valuable, and I can accelerate a young coach or coach's development in a very specific domain by helping them and giving them advice and giving them techniques to get the best out of it. But
and I do think that's kind of the next level, at least for me. And it sounds like you're there right now of, it's training the next generation of coaches. It's not so much training your athletes. Still, that's important, but it's the expertise of how do you save the next generation of coach time? What's important? What isn't important? And, my assistant will come up to me and like I said, I'm not so much involved in the day-to-day strength conditioning anymore, but when I'm out there on the floor and I'm just observing everything and I'm taking mental notes, and when he sees my face, like I'm biting my lip and my eyes are kind of twisted, he goes, all right, what's going through your head? I'm like, well, I'm seeing this. I'm just, every movement, we get in this age of everybody wants to use technology and quantify everything, and we're losing our coaching eye. And if we trade for somebody, we sign somebody in the summer, I really don't care what all of our tests tell me. I want to give them 500 different exercises, an exaggeration, but over the first 2 or 3 days, and I'm putting together that mental image of dynamic flexibility, static flexibility, strength on left leg, right leg, balance, all of these factors. And I'm building my program and his profile just by watching movement. Of course we would like to quantify it. It helps us. It helps our eye, but I think a lot of young coaches are losing their eye because they're relying on technology. And if you're just looking at a CSV of what the outputs are, you forget about what it actually looked like, and is it acceptable? And, why didn't you intervene and coach him on, the second set or the second rep? I'm like, no, I want to see if his body can figure it out. I want to see what his strategy is, especially in the second set. Does he now come back after doing something else and say, okay, now I'm grooved? It also tells me what kind of learner he is.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to start tweaking it. And maybe it's as simple as I'm just going to put a medicine ball over his head and do the same exact movement. And I want to see what the strategy now becomes. Because I think in my mind, I'm putting together a puzzle and I'm thinking, I think this is going to fix it. And if it doesn't, all right, well, what's next?
Yep.
Rather than saying, let me look at all of this data and fill in the blanks. So many youngsters are losing that coaching eye, I think.
I'd 100% agree. And one of the things that I've noticed, because I'm involved in a few local universities here, guest lecturer and so forth. And Shawn, it's interesting. My degree was definitely human movement science. And this is back in South Africa. Our years divided semesters divided to terms, and every term we did sports. We did a bunch of different sports as part of our curriculum. Sometimes you get tested on the muscles used, sometimes the movement, sometimes performing stuff. The example I used, we did diving off the 1 meter, the 3 meter, and the 5 meter for extra credit, and you had to do forward, backward, reverse, inward, and twist. Okay. Now we could wear wetsuits, so there was some stuff there, but we got to expect, and the people that came through my degree at that stage definitely weren't as well versed in the strict terminology of sports science. Definitely, the current graduates, 25 years later, are way better, way further ahead than I was as a graduate. But we kind of knew movement. We kind of knew, and we're sort of all active. And I wonder if universities are going, hey, what's easier to teach? That ability to just go GPS, workload, volume times intensity, you can teach that, you can test it, and you can do it. Or do you have this kind of messier, but maybe way more insightful, way more deep, exploring movement type mentality? And the universities, I think, have chosen the former, and then the student comes out,
right,
and they struggle.
It's easier to teach.
Yep.
Yeah. But I want those people, like for the interns or young strength coaches, I want you to be driving down the road and be fascinated when you see somebody jogging and say, oh my God, stop jogging, get on a bike, you're hurting yourself. Like, I want you to be working out every issue they're having. I love those people, because that's how, I mean, I'm watching people walk by and just like, oh wow, really tight hip flexor there. Oh, you shouldn't be wearing those sandals.
Yep.
You know, your ankle just doesn't have that movement. I'm seeing the crease in your ankle.
Yep. And then even to take a step further, I'm surprised at how many university graduates aren't training themselves. Just out of, same thing what you were talking about there, just the curiosity. Let me see if I can do this. Let me see, hey, here's a program. What, you want me to do 10 sets of 10 of all these exercises? I'll give it a bash. You know what I mean? Like, just try it. I remember reading Louis Simmons stuff. This would have been in the 90s about chains. And I bought I had no idea. It was a one block. And I bought a chain, but I don't know how you measure chains, but it would have been in like millimeters. It added no significant weight, but that was all I could afford. And I didn't really know what the chains were. Right. So I had these shitty chains off the side of my bench. I looked like an idiot, but that was all I knew. Like I did. And then from there, someone said, hey, you know, it's actually going to be more like this. But that's how I learned. It was just curiosity. That's it.
Yeah. Try it. You have to try it. For sure. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Now, we've got a question here from Julian, and I'm not sure how much, given what we've just talked about. Please, can you share insight into Victor Oladipo's? How do you say that? Oladipo's rehab. How much insight can you give into that?
Yeah, I really can't. I can't get into that.
All right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Julian.
That's okay. So just to fill me in, what's the injury? Or can you
he
give that
had he had a quad tendon rupture.
Okay.
So he is, let's see, not this last February, or maybe January, but he's what month is this? So it was like the February before. So he's 16-ish months out. Very significant injury. But yeah, I'm not allowed to discuss that.
Yeah, sure. That's all good. Sorry, Julian, but very specific question. Well, Shawn, thanks for do you have any questions or anything you want to touch on?
No, I mean, we've hit a wide range of topics. My head's spinning right now. I'm just, I'm gonna have to go to sleep right after this.
Good luck.
I'm pretty introverted, so that's why I can hide behind my contract at times. And some people I just like, and I like following you, and I believe in what you do, and I like your message, so I agreed to doing it. But you don't see my name out there very often because I just don't do a lot of stuff. I don't like doing a lot of stuff. So this is exhausting to me.
Yep.
For me to talk this long in a row. I thought you said, when our initial exchanges, I thought you were talking about 30 minutes. And then when I followed up with you and you said, no, it's more like 90 minutes. I'm like, oh, what am I getting myself into? Wow. I couldn't talk about anything for 90 minutes. But no,
I'm the same thing. So if we take the definition of Julian just replied, no worries, thank you so much. That was really interesting, insightful. I use the definition of introvert as I get my energy from being by myself, and extroverts get their energy from being around people. And I'm exactly the same. Like when we were locked down and I was doing these daily, Shawn, I was a wreck. And my wife was like, you were sitting on a computer for an hour. Like, how tiring could it be? I'm like, yeah, like it is a tough one if you're an introvert. And then, okay, so let's just quickly touch on that. So when you come home, do you just shut down, shut up because all day you'd be motivating and encouraging and giving of yourself?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would say that while I'm at work. It's it's a selective process, depending on my mood that day, which is unfortunate. But But what I did find during this whole quarantine and still during COVID is the Zoom calls got overwhelming. It was exhausting and that sort of thing. But what I realized is I really do get energized by people. But when I have that interaction, I then need to go and just be isolated, and I shut down and I close off. But my office, where it is, it's glass walls, and I'm right on the corner of the practice court and the weight room. And I have a constant flow of people, whether it's interns, assistants, analytics people, coaches, whoever it may be, everybody that could be in the building. And I feel like I'm either putting out forest fires or communicating something that may or may not be important, but there's all these conversations, and I leave work and I'm drained. And when I'm not at work and during the quarantine and COVID, it's amazing how much I really miss that and how much that does energize me. But it doesn't change the fact that I still need to it's exhausting. But to not have that interaction with people, it's also hard.
Oh, I get that. I've got I've got some strategies that I do. One of them being we live on a bit of a, I don't know what you call it, like acreage or whatever, and I just jump on my mower and mow for an hour or two. But it's kind of like training, isn't it? Apply a stress and then allow for some decompression time or adaptation time or relaxation, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like I've got a good balance with that. But I can tell if I get that balance wrong. If I get it where there's too much interaction, and then just like an athlete from a physical point of view, if there was too much training, too much loading, too frequent or something like that, and then they would struggle.
Right.
I feel I'd struggle too.
Yeah.
But this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, no, thank you.
And hopefully we'll catch up. I'll try to get to the States. Well, it'll be less so now, but I was an exchange student in New York. So I'll try and get to the States, and then once every 18 months, 2 years, but then on the way there, stop off somewhere and catch up with someone or go visit someone or something like that. So hopefully I
wouldn't recommend a visit anytime soon.
No. Well,
on many levels.
Yeah, well, and this is a tough one. Coming from South Africa, third world country, really bad violence and a bunch of other things. There's what you see on social media. Then there's the reality. Sometimes those are overlapped quite a lot, but then other people it's not, and it's hard to work out. But we are at least nationally locked. When I say we, my family at least, we nationally locked down for a fair amount of time. We'll wait for things to pass over before we make any decisions. But, all right, cool.
One thing I did want to add. I think that talking about COVID, I think that for me, there was a lot of clarity in that as to how much we often overemphasize our roles and the value we play. And a lot of athletes are very good being self-sufficient, and the world isn't going to stop if we are not beside them at every moment of the day, and that we need to just stop holding hands. We need to realize that if we're working with adults, that they're adults, and survival of the fittest, and most of them really just figure it out. I was amazingly surprised at how well our guys did on their own time.
Well, even broader, it's to me. So I work quite closely with swimming at the moment, and then it's sort of more of a coach education than athlete specific stuff. And the number of coaches are going, wow, we were shut down for 9 weeks or whatever it was, and our athletes came back. Swimming is a very much a volume sport, and they'll after a peak competition, some of those coaches will be like, okay, Shawn, can we get back? Can we get you back in the pool? Can we do this? Can we do it? And they kind of go, wow, like after 9 weeks and our swimmers are still doing pretty well and they haven't lost everything. And I'm hoping that there'll be a bunch of lessons we could learn that might have been an opportunity to question some paradigms. Do we need to hold the athlete's hand the whole time? Do swimmers need to do the amount of volume? I work with some national level rowers, and there seems to be a mindset shift, another volume-based sport, and they're kind of seeing the benefits of like, hey, we got to get fit quickly. Let's just work on, we don't have volume to play around with. Let's play around with intensity. And they kind of going, hey, wait a second. So we took all this time off. We increased the intensity. We didn't have this big aerobic base that we thought we needed to have, but the times are pretty similar. We can break a number of paradigms, or at least we can reflect and question. It's okay, is what we thought we knew actually true, or is it just we did it because they did it because people before them did it?
I think that's it, and we have to remember that our ego, our jobs, we should dictate less and guide more.
Yes, 100%. There's a saying, don't be the sage on the stage, be the guide on the side. Something like that. There's a great...
Oh, yeah.
Don't be the sage on the stage. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, man. I appreciate it.
Shawn, thanks again. I'll process this and put it up, and hopefully our paths cross again soon.
Thanks for the 3 people who listened.
Cheers.
All right. Talk to you. Bye.